conversation. I love it just so you can take a moment, just introduce yourself to the people. Really, just anything that you feel like the people should know about you before we get into this conversation. And then we're just going to jump in.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica. A lot of my friends and family call me Jessie. I am an account manager in sales, and I also do modeling part time as well. Um, just a little bit about me. I'm originally from New Jersey. I live in Seattle now. And yeah, we can kind of dive in from there.
Yes, I feel like that's the life and story of being an entrepreneur, an artist, or, someone who has multiple jobs because you have to work in a capitalist system and you are an artist, you're a creator, which I personally believe that each human being is a creator, is an artist naturally. But, sometimes we get taken out of that. But in this journey of having to maintain the dollar and getting out our creative experience or expression comes a lot of different experiences, and that is where I feel like shifting your perspective really comes into the conversation, because boy, do some experience have you looking at things differently. They say hindsight is 2020, right? Like it's always easier after the fact. So what has that looked like for you as a model and someone who, also works in the more corporate settings?
Yeah, it's actually funny because as you were just talking about like multiple jobs within just life, being able to survive, I was thinking about like even before college, like my journey just kind of started as me. I think it was like 15, 16 years old, having to get my first job. And I remember being in school, I was playing basketball, but then I was also working right after school as well. So in college, I found myself working like two jobs minimum at a time. And then even like after college, I found myself before I moved here working 8 different jobs. And now it's just interesting to be in a space where I am working one full-time job and then I'm able to actually do something that I'm passionate about on the side, not necessarily for money, but because I actually love it. So it's interesting, like even thinking about shifting perspective. Like I remember I came a point where I moved out here and I was working 2 jobs and I found myself falling back into that, rat race in a sense. And I told myself like, I'm done with this. Like there's no reason why I need to continue working 2 different types of jobs just to survive. Like I need one good job and then I can go do the things that I love on the side. And it's been interesting and a different shift because I'm so used to having multiple things going on all of the time. But it is even a perspective shift to have to like slow down and like, not have to feel like obligated to have to do something, but to want to do something.
Ooh, and I feel like that is one of those shifts that makes or breaks sustainability, because I've heard so many people not make that shift, but instead it's like burnout is the inevitable, alternative to shifting and reallocating your energy. Because I was definitely, and I'm still an entrepreneur. I like to have multiple things going on, multiple projects that I'm working on, right? But I don't like being overworked. And we get into this place where it's a slippery slope. Like you said, you got too many things on your plate, you're working too many jobs, you're saying yes to every opportunity, and next thing you know, you are right back in that rat race that you didn't want to be in, spread too thin again. So it's definitely a shift that I've come to as well, perspective wise, where I've had to realize, okay, I actually don't want to do everything. It doesn't feel good to do everything.
Right.
I feel tired. I feel overstimulated as hell. Okay. Like, somebody with a bad attitude, they probably overstimulated because it's not cute.
Right.
And so I had to realize that, right? Look, overstimulated people are clenching their jaw. They probably got a headache. It starts to stack up really quickly when you're doing too much. And that perspective shift was huge for me.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
A couple of,
Oh, go ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
Oh, no, I was just
Oh
going
no,
to,
I was just gonna start getting into some other shifts as well. You know, as you do these perspective shifts, a lot has to kind of fall off for alignment to come in. And I feel like that's what these perspective shifts are ultimately helping with bringing alignment.
yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because, like, even just going into like the healing aspect of things and like being overdoing your own things. And I know it's not something we necessarily talked about, but I actually had my own health journey.
Oh no. It's saying, yeah, it's saying that you have Riverside open in other tabs.
Oh,
I don't know if that's
okay.
right, but it says ask you to close all other browser tabs open with Riverside.
Okay. Can you, is this good? Hold on, hold on. Is that good?
Honestly, I'm gonna sleep this thing. Okay, well, it said that, I mean, it seems like if you close the tabs, we should be good. We'll just pick back up and I'll edit, obviously that part out.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't.
because nothing else popped up.
Okay. Yeah, it's making
And
me
your
upload some.
internet connection.
Yeah, my internet's fine. It's just making me, it's like uploading something. It's like trying to download Riverside or something. Hmm.
I thought it was a web.
Okay. Well, it's okay.
Okay. We'll give it like a couple of beats of silence just so it's easier to find on the tapes, and then I'll pick. And the thing about perspective shifts that I found is that they happen time and time again throughout my life. There's been a few perspective shifts that I've actually had to make to get to where I am right now. One in particular, and I'll talk about this because we are filming this in February, which is, the month of love. Valentine's Day is coming up this weekend. Um, and love is where one of the places that I had to shift my perspective around. I grew up with separated parents who eventually divorced when I was 17. And I mean, it's not even just them. Let me not put it just on them. I actually didn't witness a lot of healthy relationships at all growing up. And by a lot, I would say none. Like, I couldn't tell you of one. Maybe one of my like neighbors' moms or something. But you never even really know what was happening with those adults. They were just like maybe holding it together a little bit better than other people. But I did not have high hopes for relationships, and I didn't think that I would be married for 8 years. So I feel like opening up myself to love and accepting love, um, when it was offered to me, was like genuinely a perspective shift that I had to develop over time. Um, Learning how to lean on people, finding that community and shifting from holding people at arm's length to realizing that some people, and that was the part for me. For me, it was like so all or nothing. Like either everyone has to have access to me or no one can have access to me. But it's like, no, girl, discernment. Like learn how to filter out who should have what access to you. You know what I mean? Like in all these different experiences that we have, and certainly for myself over the years, perspective shifts have been a thing that comes time and time again, and it's all along it's directing you towards alignment, and it's in my experience, it's leading you to where you're meant to be.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. And definitely very, very relatable in a lot of ways. Yeah, my parents also separated very young. They separated when I was about 6 years old. And it was just, I mean, initially, I think when you're so young, you don't really think about how it's really affecting you in your life, um, until you get older, and then you actually start to realize how, these things have really taken a toll on your personal life. And when I was younger, I'm like, okay, yay, I get 2 Christmases, 2 birthdays, 2 this, 2 that. And, it was fun. But, it is hard growing up in a household of like separated parents where your dad is dating different women, your mom is dating different men, and they're not really in stable, committed, like long term relationships where they're getting married. And that in turn starts to fall onto you. And I'm one of 4 children from my parents, and I have 2 older brothers and 1 younger brother. And I remember like my oldest brother getting his girlfriend pregnant at 19 years old, and then my second oldest brother getting his girlfriend pregnant at 18 years old. And I grew up in an environment of like, I remember being in school and women saying like, "Oh, let's get pregnant at the same time" at 15 years old. And so teen pregnancy was very high with where I grew up. And so coming from a separated household on top of like just being in environments where teen pregnancy is such a huge thing, like it was something honestly I was trying to dodge for sure. But I also found myself like in not the best relationships, like just finding myself like needing love so much and like wearing my heart on my sleeve, but giving love to the wrong people. And it wasn't until after college, when I had a beautiful but very toxic relationship, that I realized that I needed to actually take some time to myself. And through that, it was 3 years of like just celibacy, just me, God, and prayers, reading, audios, like everything that I could do just to feed into myself. I established my values. I established who I am as a person. I established what I was looking for from a partner, from a man, from life, what I wanted in general. And um, I was healing. Like that was probably one of the most beautiful things that I was able to do for myself is take that 3 years. And during that time, like it was definitely a lot of forgiveness, for those around me, a forgiveness for my parents, because at the end of the day, like your parents are doing the best that they can do with what they know. So it's like being like sitting here putting all this judgment and putting all this, shame onto them is not fair to them because they don't know any better or they didn't know any better. They were young, trying to figure it out too. And your kids are probably going to do the same to you at some point, right? You're going to probably traumatize them in some type of way. So, you know, you just gonna have to accept it. But
Children that don't never
what was
children that don't exist are never traumatized.
right? You're
I
gonna
mean,
do it in some way. So it's just like you have to learn to accept it. And all we can do is try to be better. And I'm just so grateful for that time that I've been able to take for myself. And something you mentioned too was like being able to like lean on other people. I think for me, there was a huge chunk of time where I wasn't leaning on other people. I was honestly leaning on drugs. Like I was leaning on marijuana. That was my coping mechanism, is being able to depend on me and myself, because I could trust me. I couldn't trust everybody else around me. Like my family, I felt was flawed, and I didn't feel comfortable telling people about what was really going on because there was this image that I had of myself and that I portrayed that I didn't want other people to understand, like, oh, she's not what I thought she was. She doesn't come from where I thought she was. And, it's like to think about all of the like trials and tribulations that I've been through in my life is it's kind of crazy. So, yeah. Um yeah, I mean, I think it's like really
Yeah.
important to just be able to like just open up to people and to like really have like you said, just a few like really strong people that you can lean on. Um because like being able like getting rid of like the drug of marijuana was so important for me in my life, and being able to like bring friendships in was even better for me. um yeah, so I think for me, like one of the biggest things that I had to learn was stop depending on a drug. And I think like a drug can be pretty much anything that has you taking away from you and your purpose in some ways. And everybody has a drug. It could be music, it could be video games, it could be um actual drugs. For me, it was marijuana and music, honestly. Um but I had to realize that it was important for me to be able to build relationships around me that were meaningful and that actually helped me. And I remember the first time I like actually confided in a friend, how much it just took off of my heart, honestly, and just made me feel more whole and more complete. And eventually I've gotten to the point where I don't smoke marijuana anymore, and there's no shame to that. Obviously, it's everybody has their own choice, but for me, it was important for me to stop doing that. And it was because like as you were talking about love, like I knew for myself that long term, like as I was going through my healing journey and my celibacy, that I wanted to attract a man that wasn't smoking marijuana. And I just felt so dependent on it at the time, that if I was to be leaning into this drug so much, I would attract somebody like that to me. And something my mentors have always told me was, what you are is what you attract. And I did not want to attract me. So I knew it was important for me to let that
Come on.
go.
That's accountability.
Hmm. Absolutely. And so, yeah, it's been
That's
a
self
journey.
accountability too. Like, in shifting into like who am I, who I want to be. That's something I talk about. I'm like, figure out who you want to be or where you want to be. Who are you now? Where are you now? Build the gap.
Absolutely.
Whatever you feel like that is. You said like a few things that were relatable to me, especially earlier when you were talking about the experience with witnessing or having proximity to child or like teenage pregnancy. Um, I am a child of a, a woman who was pregnant in her teens. And when
Mhm.
I tell you, she had 10 daughters, and every single one of them, we actually, all 12 of her kids got to hear the story. You, she don't want to see it, you know what I mean? So it was like so strict, like even before 16 and Pregnant, which was, a show that I think it was on like MTV. And look, that show would have scared me straight, even if I didn't already have my mama breathing down my neck about it. Because I was like, oh, hell no. But and that's another thing that I'm like, I'm not even trying to judge that, because I remember, I learned young that literally some people genuinely just want to be parents, and that is literally what's going to make them happy, and they will, do all the things for that child, that they need to do. And I remember that was like, I was in, I want to say like maybe early high school, and there was like a pregnant girl at my school, and I remember that was a really big deal, because I went to an art school, and I mean a lot of the kids there were hella privileged, so it wasn't like, you know it wasn't like it was likely that they couldn't afford to take care of the issue should they think there was one. um, but this, from what I remember, like word on the street, mind you, she was grades above me, and I never talked to her. But they're like, oh, she like wants a baby, and it's like a whole thing for her. And then I remember Like, went on through high school. I was like a senior. And, at that point, everyone's talking about what's next. What are we doing? And people are like, yeah, like some people are like, oh, I can't wait to be a mom. Perspective shifting moment. Okay. Environments where perspectives shift. School. Okay. I remember high school when I came, because I was raised in suburbia. Like, I'm from Portland, but we were raised in suburbia. We ended up moving up to Washington in suburbia. And then I came up to Seattle where I live now. And I was like, it's been the most time that I've spent in like the city, even though Portland is hella city too. It just like we didn't spend like a ton of time in my mind in the city populated part of Portland. So when I came up to Seattle, it felt like, wow, so much new information. I'm meeting so many different kind of people that didn't necessarily live down there. And that is where my perspective started to change. Again, in college, I'm meeting a whole bunch of people that now it's like more international even than in high school and middle school, because there are folks who had come from so far, like tons of international students. If you know colleges, they be loving them some international students, okay? Because the international students are paying that international money to be there. And so I was getting in all these different spaces where I could shift my perspective because there was information that I had not had access to before. Now, here's a key part about shifting your perspective. You don't have to do it. Like, if you want to just keep the same perspective forever, you could do that. You could encounter new information, decide to do nothing with it, not apply it to your life at all, and just keep skipping down the road the way that you're doing it. But I found that there's different spaces and times, like you were saying, with being in that moment of isolation for a moment, where you were just with yourself and with God, and you know, with what I always like to say when I'm with myself, I'm with like the highest version of myself. My most developed mind is there as well, and that is a moment where your perspective can shift as well. That's that kind
Mhm.
of space.
Right. No, absolutely. And that was good. Thank you for sharing. And there's so much with that. I agree. I think everybody has their own journey in life. And sometimes when we look at other people's lives, we have this like idea that maybe we need to do better, we need to do something different, or, even like, for instance, us having this conversation right now, talking about our journey, it's not about you doing what this person has done. It's what makes sense for you and your life. And, for me, I needed to go through those shifts. I needed to go through that perspective change because I knew that if I didn't, I was going to continue attracting the same type of relationships into my life. And, it could be friendships, it could be like, it's just boundaries. Like, it's being able to set boundaries with yourself because every time you set a boundary with yourself, it's saying, I love myself that. Right. Okay. I can just go right into Seattle then. Yeah. And so, something that you were talking about is how you moved from Portland, and from like the suburbs up to Seattle eventually. And I come from the suburbs as well. I went to a college town, and that was a perspective shift on its own because like I said before, like I come from a suburbs where teen pregnancy was like at an all-time high, and there was a lot of like gangs, and there was a lot of it wasn't the best area, let's just say that. And now here I am at this college where I'm the first generation to be in college and being able to be an athlete in school. So I was playing basketball, and so I had so many connections, and I was kind of popular in school, and I got to know a lot of different people, and it was really cool. And then I moved to Seattle, and I knew absolutely nobody. And again, that was another perspective shift for me because it was like I remember having like just a thought to myself, realizing like it's like life is so much more than just you. Like it's about everybody else. It's not just about you. And I think for so long, like I've made it everything about me. And I think we all do to some degree, and we do it all the time, right? But it was also just realizing that there's so much more in life to give, even like with what you're doing right now is with this podcast, like it's sharing to the world and hoping to help somebody. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing. And it's a great, just part of your healing journey, as well as being able to give back to other people in some type of form or fashion. It could be, I mean, one of the things that I love to do is when I see a homeless person is I give them something. It doesn't have to necessarily be money. I've given sunglasses to this guy and he was like, these are so cool. And so um it's just what makes sense for you, and your journey is your journey at the end of the day. And I remember hearing that so much from my mentors, that you can't, think your journey is going to look like anybody else's, because, and this is my own faith, but I believe that God has his own path for you, and you have to walk on your own path. Otherwise, you're forcing yourself to be somebody that you're not and something that you're not.
So real and so true. And yeah, you absolutely called it. That is exactly what my healing journey is like. Um, in particular, part of the reason why I started the podcast is because I was on, and I've said this a couple of times. I'm like over here starting to sound like my mom, repeating stories and stuff. But, African Americans, we practice, a long tradition that comes back from the continent of oral storytelling. So I will never stop telling my stories, but as is my cultural entitlement to do so. So, my healing journey really started when I was 18 years old, right? That's when I started my personal healing journey. I said, things ain't right, and I know I need there's some things that are not aligned, and I'm not happy with this, and I'm going to start to try to be different in a way that is more fulfilling and healing for me. So I'd already experienced so many things by then. But then, right, so that was me healing all by myself in isolation. And then after I graduated college, I started working in the nonprofit sector, and I started doing holistic homelessness prevention. And my job was to create the curriculum, create the programming that is holistically gonna lead people away from homelessness. And what I found through my research, and I have a degree in community psychology, but what I found was that holistically support a person and they're not going to be homeless. Boom, there you go. So we started doing programming that was, you know, for the mind, for the body, for the spirit, all of these things to help people be aligned, to know what resources are around, to know what they're capable of, to know what transferable skills they have. Where if you can't work this job anymore, how do you take the skills you have and work this job, right? Because we know employment means that someone's at least more likely to have housing, though in our current market is no guarantee. So I'm doing all of these things and I'm witnessing people have these moments of healing or these moments of like epiphany or breakthrough. And I was like, oh my goodness, like healing by yourself is only a part of it. And it's not even like a huge part. Like healing together is what we need to be doing. Like that's the part. And so like healing and community became this whole thing for me. I was like, you guys, we gotta do it together. Like, and once I had gotten to a point, I started realizing what you said as well, which is that each of us has the ability. So even if we are not someone who's homeless, we still have the ability to help reduce homelessness through our own actions. And it doesn't mean that we have to be a billionaire. I don't have to be a millionaire. I don't have to be able to buy up a building and house people for free. I can give someone sunglasses. I can challenge someone who's speaking illy about homeless people, right? I can be like, nah, that doesn't even make any sense. And, whatever it is. So there's so many things that we can all do where if we're all doing these things, homelessness will not exist because we will have made, this shift together. And so I absolutely believe what you're saying, and I know it to be true in my own life.
Right. No, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like, and the other thing is too with healing is that it's a constant journey. Like it never stops. Like healing doesn't just end after you figure it out or had an epiphany about this or that, it's just what makes sense in that time period of your life. And, as you mentioned, you started your healing journey really at 18. I started mine when I was like in my 20s. Um, and I think like just over time, I've always been very conscious of things, but it wasn't until after I mentioned earlier in the podcast that there was a very specific relationship that kind of skewed things for me and kind of woke me up and it shook me where I knew I needed to just change a lot, about myself, what I wanted, my values, all of those things. And, it's interesting because after those 3 years, I started dating very intentionally, but I was going on a lot of dates. Um, and I found myself starting to even go back almost to the same type of man that I told myself I'd never go back to because it was just so familiar. And I had to catch myself, letting myself know, like, no, we worked too hard. We worked way too hard to go back to that. And um it's beautiful because now I'm in a relationship with the healthiest person I've ever been with and the longest relationship I've been in. And I always knew I was always capable of love and that I was always capable for a long relationship. I just knew that for myself, like I didn't want to waste my time with somebody that didn't make sense for my life. And just during those times, they just didn't. And I'm at least glad that I had, enough willpower to know that. But, as I was mentioning, like there's just different parts of healing in your life. And, when I was 29, I I ended up actually like getting diagnosed with like a pretty serious health condition as well. And that started a whole nother healing journey for me. And so that's why I was mentioning like healing doesn't stop and it can come in different forms and fashions and it can come in different types of ways. And through that journey itself, I had to heal from that. And it's something that I still like deal with today, but it's definitely not as vigorous as it was back then. But now I'm having to heal a whole different part of myself today because of that time in my life. And, I'm on a healing journey again, trying to figure things out. And that's okay. And it's going to continue being like this probably for the rest of my life. Um, but I think it's important to acknowledge that and to be able to understand that life is tough and that's okay. I always like to say, like, behind like every storm, there's a rainbow. And so it's just being able to get through this storm right now, but also understanding that your mind is literally creating problems for you 24/7. And you have to know when the problem is big and when it's not that big and stop making everything such a big thing, because it's like, oh, I spilled my coffee. Was it really that big of a deal as much as you made it? Because there's people literally losing family members. There's people in war right now. There's people, all these different types of things. And you're upset about a coffee. And it's not to say that you're wrong for that. It's just perspective and shifting your perspective to realizing that, okay, like life is really not that bad right now and understanding when it is and accepting that and leaning into that and being like, okay, life sucks right now, but we're going to get through it. And it could be a month, it could be a week, it could be a year, it could be a couple years. And that was something that was really hard for me over the last couple of years is realizing that tough times can actually happen for more than a couple months. It can happen for a couple years. That sucks. That sucks, but, that was a huge perspective shift for me too.
Yeah, that's a real one for sure. Um, oh man. Yeah, definitely. All of these different experiences that we have, they come with growth, you know. Sometimes they build on each other, sometimes they don't, you know. Like you said, that healing is not linear. And I mean, I know I've definitely thought I was over some shit only to encounter it, you know, down the path and realize, nope, I'm not over that one at all. So, one of the things that come with these shifts is, you know, building repetition with yourself. And there's always going to be some places where you actually don't go back there anymore. And there's going to be some places that you revisit forever. It's just about accepting yourself and accepting your journey. And as I like to say, showing up as your coach in your corner, right? Not being your biggest doubter, but being your own biggest motivator. And that's not to say that when you spill your coffee or stub your toe, it doesn't suck, but context, I think, helps to shift perspectives as we need it. So while it does allow us to hold space for the fact that, boom, I stubbed my toe. I don't like that. I don't like pain and I don't like inconvenience. But what it's also going to allow me to do is let that in there. It's not going to become anything bigger because I already have the context of my life where I'm blessed, where I am walking in alignment, where I have people around me who love me, where I have food in the refrigerator, I have a roof over my head. And so all of that context that I am being present in is going to let me honor things in the moment that they need to, feel the emotions and let them pass. And I think that's another thing that comes with that perspective shift. Another thing that comes with these perspective shifts, boundaries. Okay. Boundaries come with
Yeah.
perspective shifts. Like you said, once you realize that you didn't want to be with a certain kind of partner, that was that. Then boundaries are put in place and they're held. Even when they begin pushed up on, even, you know what I mean? Even when we encounter that old thing that's so familiar, and sometimes familiarity can really be a trap, which is, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I'm like, that's, for me, I'm like, I don't like that because I like familiar things. I like for my familiar things to be safe and I like for them to be good. But getting out of your comfort zone and giving yourself enough safety in your life so that you can get out of your comfort zone is important to do for yourself. And I know that's not necessarily a perspective shift that you may have to have. Maybe you already there, but for me, that was a shift that I had to make.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and I know we talked about it a little bit before, but yeah, boundaries are so important. Like, I really do feel like it's a form of love. And, just kind of talking a little bit more about my spirituality a little bit, but that's something that I truly believe. I don't feel like God puts things in our lives to, like, punish us. I think he puts things in our lives as boundaries to protect us. And when we go against those boundaries that he puts in place for us, we end up hurting ourselves and then we're upset. And I like to think of it as like a child with their parent. If your mom or your dad says, "Hey, don't touch that fire," and you go out and go touch that fire, you're going to burn yourself and you're going to be upset and you have nobody else to blame but yourself. And, you know, when you put that in your own life as well, when you put boundaries in your own life, I think it's a form of respect for yourself too. And I feel like sometimes that's a little challenging, is respecting yourself and actually following through with what you say you're going to do. You know, I think that we all probably struggle with it in some form or fashion, right? Um, I tell myself I'm not going to eat sugar, and I go out and eat sugar, and then I get upset and then I eat more sugar. And honestly, it's probably because I didn't respect my own boundary. I didn't respect myself. Therefore, I don't feel like I'm good enough. And I just continue falling back into this trap when it's like, well, why am I putting this boundary in place in the first place? Well, it's like maybe I just have sugar at this time of the day or at certain points, you know? So it's like being able to understand what boundaries you're putting in place, why you're putting them in place, and then if they're actually even realistic for yourself too. And something you mentioned as well is just even having gratitude for, life, being able to have a roof over your head, having clean water, having a usable toilet, like all those things. I think when you're also excited about life and when you are like genuinely appreciative of what you have, I think that's a whole nother form of like love for yourself too, because you're not constantly having to chase something. And there's nothing wrong with having something to chase. I think that it's a beautiful thing. You should want more for yourself and you should want to constantly keep trying to strive and achieve different things if that's what you want for yourself, right? But at the same time, it's like setting realistic expectations, setting realistic boundaries within life is also very important too. Yeah, you should 100% want more for yourself, and but with that, it's also like being realistic about what you want for yourself, and you can have anything that you want in your lifetime, but like it's also about like realistic expectations and being able to actually chase those things, and like setting boundaries and expectations is going to be so important for your life. So if you're saying that I want this beautiful car, whatever car that is for you, but you're not doing anything to go get that car, then you're setting yourself up and you're like setting expectations for yourself and you're hurting your self-worth because you're not getting closer to that. So now you start not necessarily liking yourself as much anymore. But if you're sitting here saying you want this nice car, but then you put things in place, such as ways to create finances in whatever form and fashion it is, I'm not judging, to go get that, then you're telling yourself every single time you're getting closer to that goal that you love yourself and your self confidence and your self worth continues to increase with that. So, yeah, I'm really excited and just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about this today.
Yeah, that was uh that's that's a lot of the advice that I give, have a goal, take it as slow as you need to, break it down as small as you need to, but be working towards it and know that you're going to achieve it and that you'll be brought what you need and the timing that you need it to do what you need to do, to do what it do. So wow, we talked about a lot. Is there anything that we haven't said or any last thoughts that you have about shifting your perspective, kind of like what can be gained from it or the process of shifting your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I would say life is life and your journey is your journey, and don't think because somebody else is where you want to be that they got there easily. Um your journey just has to be
Mhm.
what you have to go through. Um and sometimes it's not the prettiest situation, and that's okay, but you need to learn to just accept that and move forward and just take it, like you said, one step at a time.
I know you said at the start of this that you business are a model. So how can people contact you? Like how can they get in touch with you? How can they book you for their fashion show?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate just being on the podcast. This has been amazing. And it's been great just being able to talk about all the things that I've been through. I don't feel like I've ever actually really fully shared all of this information just openly. So I think it's also healing for me. In terms of being able to reach you at being able to reach me, I can be reached on Instagram at Jess B as in boy Clark with an E. And you can always reach out on my collab on my link tree and we can collab together as well. So would love to connect with anybody here.
On Linktree. I love it. Alrighty. Wonderful advice. Oh, and healing community. I don't even know what to leave you with. It's been such a good and interesting conversation. But I think what really is always what's gonna be the last thing for me is if it's not working for you, leave it behind. If the mindset isn't working, if the friend group isn't working, if the job isn't working, the car ain't working, whatever it is, don't be afraid to switch it up. And don't be afraid to choose yourself. You're the only you have. So, all right, y'all. That's been another episode of the Hot Girls Healing Podcast. If this was your first episode, thank you so much for trying something new. I hope that you learned something. I hope that something touched you, something was relatable. A weight has been lifted off of you. You feel a little less burdened. And if you've been rocking with me, thank you so much. Come in, friend. Group hug. Like, we in this for real. This is me and you. This isn't your first episode. So thank you so much for supporting the show. Make sure you like and follow and subscribe. Make sure you use hashtag Hot Girls Healing to talk about the show or find content related to it. My name is Salenna Green. I'm your host, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Since I know you're tired, since I know you're stressed, you were always favored and you were always blessed. It's all about that. Hot girls healing. We doing it our way. Hot girls healing. We better day by day. Hot girls healing. We doing it our way. Hot girls healing. And it goes